Hi everyone. In this video I'm going to show a few examples of using the AC method for factoring. So when the leading term right here, in this case it's 4, when the leading term is a 1, it's very easy to factor without having to use many strategies. Simple trial and error, and usually we can do it mentally, works. But when we have a trinomial like this, where we have, in this case, A would be 4, B would be -4, and C would be -15. Those are our coefficients. When we have our A term that is not 1, the AC method is a nice, efficient way to factor these, and it uses grouping as well. So what we're going to do in this one, I'm going to write out the steps for how to use the AC method. The first thing you have to always do is identify what A, B, and C is, because we're going to use those. And the first step after we pick out what those are is we are going to find the product of A and C. So we're going to find this product AC. You could use the same method, the same strategy if A was 1. It just seems to be faster usually to just use your regular trial and error. So the way I usually do this is I usually just draw an X, and I put whatever I have for AC there, and I put whatever B is there. And you'll see how we're going to use those numbers in a second. So in this case, my AC, if I do my A times C, I get a -60. And my B value, my middle term, what's in front of the coefficient of the linear term, is a -4. So my next step, it's very similar to when we're doing trial and error, is when we're looking for two numbers to multiply to something and add to something else. In this case, we're going to find two numbers, and we want those numbers to multiply to our AC, and we want them to add to B. Okay, very similar to when your leading coefficient is 1 and you find two things that multiply to the back and add to the middle. We're doing the exact same thing there, except we're taking into account the leading term since it's not 1. All right, so in this case, we're looking for two numbers that multiply to -60 and add to -4. So you can just kind of make a list of certain things that multiply to 60 and add to 4, and we have to just keep in mind the signs. We need them to be different signs, and we need them to combine to a -4. So in this case, if we use a 10 and a 6, our 10 being negative and our 6 being positive, those two numbers multiply to -60 and they add up to a -4. So the difference is how I'm really going to use these numbers now. So my next step, if you're new to AC method, this will be the part that will be really new to you, is I'm not going to just put those numbers in the back of my parentheses. I'm going to rewrite the middle term using these numbers, using the two numbers that we just found. Okay, so I'm going to go back and rewrite my trinomial, except instead of -4m, I'm going to write it as -10m plus 6m. Those are my two terms. And then I have my -15. That was my original -15. So I took my middle term, right? So I took my middle term right here, my -4m, and I rewrote it as a -10m plus 6m, which is the same thing. But what this allows me to do now is, because now I took 3 terms and created 4, is now I can factor by grouping. And that's really the whole point of the AC method, is to take 3 terms and divide it into and make it into 4. And the way we figure out how to break up that middle term is when we find these numbers right here. That's what tells us how to rewrite the middle term. And so once I have 4 terms, I'm going to use grouping. So I'm going to group the first 2 and the second 2, and it won't have mattered what order you wrote those in. If somebody else wrote 6m minus 10m in that order, the grouping would still work. So I'm looking for the GCF to pull out of the first 2 terms, which is a 2m, and I get a 2m minus 5 left. And I'm looking for the GCF of the second 2 terms, which is a positive 3, and I get a 2m minus 5. And then remember, with grouping, the only way I can go on is if these are the exact same thing, because now they have a 2m and 5 in common that I'm going to pull out and have a 2m plus 3 left. And so now remember, I can still check this just like I could always check my factoring. If I FOIL this out, we'll notice if I do my front, I get 4m squared. My outer, I get a 6m. My inner, I get a negative 10m. And my last, I get a negative 15. So I get exactly, once I add those two middle terms, I get exactly what I started with. So I haven't changed anything there. So let's try another one. Okay, so let's try to do 6y to the second minus 11y minus 10. So my very first step in factoring, no matter what strategy I'm going to use after, is I do look for a GCF. All right, so I'm just going to put that as a little note in the beginning. That's always the very first thing I'm looking for. But nothing divides out into all of those terms. They don't have anything in common. So and the leading term is a 6. So it's going to be much harder to try to do this with trial and error. So we're going to do our AC method. This X is just a way to organize your numbers, that's all. So remember, AC always goes here and B goes here. So AC in this case is a negative 60. Oh, this is a similar AC, but a different B. B is negative 11. So I need two numbers. I'll just write down what I'm thinking here. I need two numbers that multiply to negative 60. And the two numbers have to add to negative 11. So you have to, you can go over on the side and you can write a factor tree for 60. You can think of like 1 and 15, sorry, 1 and 60, 2 and 30, 3 and 20, 4 and 15, right? 5 and 12, and 6 and 10. And I think I found all the things that multiply. So I was just looking for a pair that could possibly get me an 11 with adding or subtracting, because I'll figure out the signs after. So I'm crossing off all of these because none of these could possibly make an 11. And the only pair that can make an 11 is 4 and 15. And the only way they're going to make that negative 11 is if the 15 is negative and the 4 is positive. And that works for the negative 60 as well, because they multiply to a negative 60. So remember how I'm using this is, I'm not just sticking these numbers in the back of my parentheses when I'm factoring. I'm taking this middle term. I'm going to write it as 4y minus 15y, which is the same thing as negative 11y. But I created 4 terms so I can do grouping. So the first two terms have a 2y in common, and then I would be left with 3y plus 2. And let's see, the next two terms, I'm going to take out anything I can, which is going to be a minus 5. And if I pull out a minus 5, I have a 3y. And if I pull out a minus, my sign will change, and I get a plus 2. And if you're not convinced with that, if you just quickly do a distribution, even if just mentally, you'll see when you distribute that negative 5, you do get what was above. And you can tell this works out really well because those are like terms. So I can pull out that 3y plus 2 of both of them, and I will be left with 2y minus 5. So it's a nice way, efficient way, without doing trial and error, to factor these. And if you were to FOIL that out, again, if you're not sure if you have the right thing, if you FOILed this out, you get exactly what was above. Okay, I have one last one here that we'll do. We've got a 20d squared plus 19d plus 3. So this one, I apologize for my dog barking in the background. This one has no GCF either. So let's get right into our AC is 60. Everything's nice and positive here. My B is 19. Well, I guess all three examples, accidentally, they all have the exact same AC number except different signs. So we made our list before for 60. I'll just kind of recreate it real quick. All right, there we go. Those are all of our factors of 60. So all of those will multiply to a 60 if I can put the right signs in. But the only one that could get me a 19 is this 4 and 15. And in this case, we want them both to be positive. I don't have to put those pluses, but I'm just showing you that those multiply to positive 60, and they add to a positive 19. So that's how I'm going to rewrite my middle term. So I'm going to rewrite my whole trinomial, but I'm going to write it as plus 4d plus 19d plus 3. Oh, not 19d, sorry. Let me erase that real quick. Okay, that was my 4d plus 15d. And those two make up my 19d. So here we go. We got our grouping. I can take out a 4d from the first two, and let's see, I'll be left with 5d plus 1 after I pull that out. And then the other one, I can take out a 3, and I will be left with 5d plus 1 again. If you get to this point and you don't have like terms here, then something along the way went wrong. Either I don't have the right numbers here, I didn't choose the right thing there, something happened. Okay, because for me to go on, that has to be like so that I can pull out that GCF of 5d plus 1 and be left with my 4d plus 3. And do a quick FOIL of that, either mentally or do it out, and you'll see that you get right up above, you get the exact same thing that we started with. So hopefully that helps with a little bit of refresher of AC method. Maybe you're just reviewing it, maybe it's brand new, but hopefully it helps you.